I don't think the key issue is what people eat. I think the key issue is the fact that people are no longer physically active. Probably the most single important change you can make is to start walking. Never mind about gym memberships. Just start walking, and start walking an hour a day and keep a record of what you do.
That was Dr David Ashton of the Healthier Weight Centre. More from him in a moment. So, hi and welcome to another week on Fat Happens, or as we're calling it now, Body Power, because that's what we're all about. A couple of reports out this week really annoyed me. The first one was that the majority of British women can no longer do up their own bras. Apparently that's some reports saying that we're all so big we can't actually do up our own bras anymore. Do you know, I simply don't believe that one. But I wonder what you think about this. There's an independent panel of experts, nutritionists and dietitians, who say that we Brits are completely deluded and uneducated about saturated fats and the dangers of them and how to avoid them. Saturated fats, they're saying, in poultry, bacon, eggs, butter and fish. They're saying that you and me, the average Brit, simply don't understand about our breakfast bacon, how high that can be in saturated fat, and they're saying that we should cut off the extra bits of fat on our bacon. They reckon that we need to be told that sort of thing. They're saying if you're making a breakfast omelette, then you should remove the yolks and only use the whites. They're saying that butter, very few of us understand how butter is absolutely full of saturated fat and that we should be avoiding that at all costs too. I wonder what you think of their guidelines. Bacon is a great favourite and one which we can easily control the fat by cutting it off the rashers. You wouldn't have much left of this streaky bacon though. With poultry, remove the skin, they say. Eggs, try and eat them without the yolk. Butter, they say all spreads are better than butter, but do they really mean those with all sorts of E numbers and stuff? The Fat Panel says ignorance has led the UK to eat 17% too much saturated fat. Half of us don't believe that saturated fats have anything to do with obesity, and 1 in 8 of us don't know that there's a lot of saturated fat in cakes and biscuits. So what do you think? Do you agree with that sort of advice, or do you find it a little bit patronising? It's interesting because we saw a little clip from Dr David Ashton earlier. Now, I spoke to him last week. He's from the Healthier Weight Centre. They have centres in Manchester, London and Birmingham. And he has helped countless people lose a lot of weight and lose it permanently. But he says the obesity problem isn't so much about what we're eating and even how much we're eating. It's about balancing energy in with energy out. Here he is again.
One of the difficulties about, I suppose, managing weight is that people think that there is this idea around that people must be eating huge amounts in order to be putting on weight. And in fact, the important thing to recognise is that it's not that people are eating so much more than they used to eat. In fact, all the evidence is that average energy intake is declining in the UK. But we seem to forget that you only need a very small amount of excess energy in order to accumulate a large amount of weight. So for example, if you eat a couple of slices of bread or a couple of biscuits each day more than you need, no more than 50 to 100 calories, in 1 year you will put on 10 pounds of fat weight, and in 5 years you'll put on 50 pounds of fat weight. It's not that people eat huge amounts more than they need, but they are almost unaware of the fact that they're eating slightly more than they need, and that slightly more than they need over long periods of time accumulates a substantial weight gain.
Why is it in that case that society thinks that fat people are thick, lazy and stupid? If it's that easy to put on weight in a land of plenty, why is it that we still look down so much upon people with weight problems?
That's a really interesting question. And remember, of course, that fashions come and fashions go, and if you went back into the 18th century, then fat was probably very attractive. Certainly if you look at some of the paintings that were around at the time, that was certainly the case. Fat used to be an indication of fertility and wealth. Of course, the associations are different now. So I think there is still this tendency in society to regard people with weight problems as being feckless, irresponsible, weak-willed and stupid, when in fact anybody who knows anything about this knows that, certainly most of my patients are pretty smart people. They know perfectly well what the origins of the problem are. And they know that the formula that, you just have to eat less and exercise more is simplistic. The question is, when so many people know what they should do, the question is, why don't they do it?
And what is the answer to that?
The answer to that, I think, often is that they find it really difficult to implement what they should do. And the reason they find it so difficult, and this is probably more important than anything else to remember, is that we are biologically programmed to eat as much as we can, as often as we can, and to eat the kinds of foods which are energy dense, foods which are full of fat and sugar. And we are biologically programmed to do that. And the reason for that is because we need to remember where we came from. For most of the 4 million years that we've been on Earth, we have lived in a very hostile environment. Hostile in the sense that we didn't know where the next meal was coming from. So the ability to store fat was a really important survival advantage. In fact, we wouldn't be having this conversation if that were not true. So there's a tremendous drive to eat as much as we can, as often as we can. On the other hand, there is absolutely no biological drive, none, to be physically active. So you take that animal, this human animal, programmed to eat as much as possible and to be as inactive as possible, and you fast forward into the 20th century, and you take the industrialization of food which happened at the beginning of the 20th century, and then you take that animal and you put it into today's environment where there is a massive surfeit of calories. You can eat 24 hours a day, it's inexpensive, it's tasty, and secondly, you don't have to be physically active to come get it. The result's a foregone conclusion. It's inevitable that we will be getting fatter because of the environment that we've created. We have an obesogenic environment. It's also important to remember that this phenomena that people kind of think goes back a long way doesn't. The epidemic, this disease epidemic that we have, is really a phenomenon of the last 3 decades. It didn't occur before that. So this is really a very modern phenomenon, and in evolutionary terms that's instantaneous. So that's why carrying this kind of weight is so bad for our health, because it's such a shock to the system from an evolutionary point of view. We haven't been used to that, and I think probably, unlike maybe a lot of other scientists, I don't think the key issue is what people eat. I think the key issue is the fact that people are no longer physically active.
Is that probably the one single most useful advice you could give to anyone?
I think the single most important piece of advice I can give is if you want to manage your weight, two pieces of advice. One is you need to think about your weight. I'm sure people who visit your site do think about it. If you don't think about it, you're not be aware. You need to be aware. Secondly, probably the most single important change you make is to start walking. Never manage gym memberships. Just start walking. Start walking an hour a day. Keep a record of what you do. That's probably the single most important thing you can do.
Because in a way, a bit like you said at the beginning, that eating one or two biscuits a day every day can contribute to an overall huge weight gain. Maybe just doing a little bit of exercise every single day, building it into your life, can have the opposite effect.
That's exactly correct. That's exactly right. You balance. Remember, we have to balance this energy ratio. People are so focused on what they take in, completely ignore the energy expenditure part of the equation, which is an integral part of first law of thermodynamics. That's what dictates how much energy you store. So being physically active is absolutely fundamental to the success of your weight management. And if you look at all the data on people protecting their weight loss and being successful in doing it, they're all physically active. And the activity of choice is walking.
So what's your view? Do you think maybe the experts, the dietitians and nutritionists, are telling us stuff we already know? Do you think we've all got to get on our bikes or get out walking like Dr Ashton says? And if so, how can you do it? How will you build it into your day? These are all subjects that the people who are trying to solve the obesity crisis are going to be going on and on about for years yet. But what's your view on it? I'd love to know.